Hello, welcome to the Old Iron Lever channel. My name is Bob, and today's video is going to be a look at the shop-made braking system that was on my 13-inch South Bend lathe. It works really well. It's been that way since the previous owner put it on, and the reason I took it apart was the brake lining was worn out and I needed to replace that. So you kind of see two things in this video. I originally started out just to make a video about replacing a riveted brake lining in case somebody hadn't seen it before. And I thought, well, you're probably interested in how this brake was made. Maybe you want to make one for yourself. So I'll try and give you some dimensions and kind of a look at the pieces of this brake. And if you like it and you want to build it, take the dimensions and measurements and things with a grain of salt. You'll probably have to make some adjustments. This is the approximate measurements I got off of this unit here, and it works just fine. So that said, let's first take a look at the components here. Okay, here we go. These are the components to the brake. I'm going to grab a tape measure real quick. Okay, so we have an arm here. It comes through, there's a slot cut in the side of the casting for the main base to the lathe. It's big enough for this to fit and slide up and down. And on the other end, right below the hinge boss on the left side of the casting, there's this little stud is in there, and it is the pivot point for the pedal. So on the other end, coming up from here, is a rod that runs up to a pivot that's this one's on a rivet. When you install this with the pedal kind of pulled up in the upward position, or this just released, you want to be able to press this up against the side of the wheel, the pulley wheel, so that this is kind of flush against the surface of that wheel. That'll determine how far to the right or the left this pivot is. I'll give you some approximate dimensions in a minute. So let's start out with the lever. From the bend point to the end is just about 15 or 17 3/4 inches. From the bend point to the hole for the pin here is about 14.5 inches. And then coming from we get on the other side here. Coming from this weld joint here out, it's about 8.5 inches to the end of the pedal, and the drop to the top of the pedal from the top of this is about 4.5 inches. Hopefully that gives you enough to build that. That's kind of really to suit whatever you want it to be anyway. This little rod here is 11.5 inches long. And there's a spring here too. The compressed length of it, or the relaxed length of it, is from eye to eye is about 5 inches, call it. And this little hook here goes through the upper part of the spring and hooks into the framework where the quick change gearbox, the bottom of it sits. So if you crawl around up in there, that's where this one's hooked. If you want to do something different for the pivot for the spring, that's fine. From loop to loop on that, it's about 5 3/4 inches. Okay, now the pivot, from the pivot point out, the whole arm is about 3 inches long, but really from the pivot point to the hole where this rod is about 2 inches. And the other end here is the hole is about 2 3/4 inches out, and that, so the inner hole, this hole here, is for this rod to be in. This hole here is for the spring to be in. This other hole was an extraneous hole that probably some experimentation that they did with it decided didn't work very well. So, okay, on the other side of things, the pivot to the end of the arm that's got the pad on it is about 3 inches, and the pad is about 2 inches by 1 3/4. It's not, you know, completely the full width of the brake lining. You can make it however you want, but that's the way this one is. So I just wanted to give you those dimensions, and then when it's put together, it's going to go up like so. This would be on up. These two come through 2 holes in the casting and mount this pivot. This hole here, this half of the stud goes through the casting, and this end of it here is like a shoulder bolt for this to pivot on. And then there's a couple cotter pins to keep the rods from falling out. Okay, all that said, let me give you a quick sketch. On the front of the big casting that makes the stand for the left side of the lathe, there's 2 lugs on the far left side here. This is the opening for the door where you can access the belts and things. There's also a cover on the left side. Okay, these 2 lugs here are where the pivot pins for the door go. So, giving you approximate measurements again, for the hole, the center of this pivot here will be about vertically in line with the left edge of the hole, and about 3.5 inches below the bottom of this lug here, or 11 inches above the top of this lug. From inside to inside, that dimension is about 14.5 inches on my lathe. I'm assuming yours would be the same if it's the same model lathe. The pivot point, the center point for the hole that the pedal pivot goes on, is about in line with the center of the hole and about 7/8 of an inch below the bottom of the lug. Hope that all makes sense. I'm going to go put this back together, and then I'll show you some more pictures of it up close, give you maybe a little bit better picture for how things fit. So. Okay, I'm on a handheld right now, and just kind of give you a view of what's going on right below that lug. Right below the lug, you can see right here is the that stud that comes out that holds the end of the pedal pivot, and it gives you an overall view of the thing. So the first step is going to be to drill out the rivets, and this may or may not also be glued onto the backing plate, and we won't know till we get the rivets out and get it checked out, but for now I'm going to assume that all I have to do is take the rivets out. And I'm also assuming that the 1/8 inch drill bit I've got loaded up here is the right one to get the rivets. I'm not rocket science by any means, just does not look like it's bonded, so we'll go over to the bench and pry everything apart. persuasion, and it comes right off. And clean up the rivets that are left in there. So the first thing you do is just measure off a piece the same size as the original, and it's slice yourself off a piece of this we got from Granger, or McMaster Carr. Okay, next we're going to go over to the drill press. Going to clamp the piece of material onto the backing plate here, the frame, what do you want to call it. And I got a 5/32 drill bit in there. We're just gonna there we go. I think that hole's a little bit big enough. There's some wiggle room in it. It should work out all right. Now I got to countersink these things, and I measured the depth of the previous ones, and they were down where we were about 90 thousandths, 85 or 90 thousandths from punching all the way through. So what I've done is I've taken a 3/8 counter bore, and the pilot for it is too small, but I think I can line it up pretty good without worried about that. But the pilot is set at 90 thousandths, so if I don't push too hard when I hit the mill table on it, it'll stop it at just the right depth. So we're going to go over to the mill and see what we can do about countersinking these. The diameter of this is 3/8 of an inch, and that's about 20 thousandths bigger than the head of the rivet, which I think is fine. So hopefully we can hit this fairly square, and the holes are like so. Ready to give this a try and see how it works. Okay, well, in the spirit of improvising everything I possibly can, got it set up. I have a piece of 3/8 drill rod sticking out of the vise there. Move it to that one next to it so you can see it better. There we go. I don't have a rivet set for these, but I do have some tools for starting a roll pin. So I think I'm going to see how that works for getting these going. Actually pretty good, I think. It's wandering a little bit. That's a bigger one to do better. And I'll finish it off by flattening it out. Okay. It looks like it's set pretty good. The rivets, all except for that one, are pretty good. I think they're all good enough. So let's go reassemble it and try it out. Okay, give you a little guided tour now that I got it together. So I got it assembled, and when I had the hole lined up the way it was before, remember that round piece that there was a riveted pivot in there for the arm to pivot on. Anyway, that round piece had 2 holes drilled in it and tapped. And in the original hole here, the brake pad was sitting like this, and it was dragging a little bit on this lower edge. So I moved I rotated that little piece a little bit and moved it out. So it straightened this out. Everything is free now. I'll just spin it. So it just coasts to a stop nicely. And then its foot on the brake comes right to a halt. Looks like it works great now. Anyway, the upper part of the spring is caught right up here on the bottom edge of the frame that the quick change gearbox hooks up to. And I'll give you a little look at the working end of it here too. Okay, now you can see the pad from the inside. This is actually from the left side of the machine. And if I don't vibrate the camera out of position. Perfect. Anyway, that's the end of that project. And we'll get off to making another one. Well, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it. If you did, surely give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe if you like watching these videos. And until we get together again for another video, happy trails.